Hello, this is Gloria Braunschweig. I'm going to cover today a chapter out of my book, Rapid Implementation. This particular chapter covers fraud, and it's one of the more common ones that I've actually delivered. The chapter is Chapter 16, Don't Let the Fox in the Henhouse. My first tip is don't pre-sign checks. In a Great Plains installation back in the 1990s, the owner of a parking lot sweeping company signed a few checks before he left on vacation. It became so easy for him and the bookkeeper. Over 6 years, he gradually began pre-signing every single check that the bookkeeper used. Over the years, the bookkeeper doubled company expenses, paying herself and her daughter an equal amount for every check that she wrote for the company. Number 2, don't hire felons. Now, this may seem straightforward, but you need to do background checks on new employees in every state that they've resided within. If you're in a high-risk industry, check the state that you're in and every state around it. Not all states share information on felons. Tip number 3, separate routines as much as possible. Now, this may seem difficult in a small company, but even in a small company, the owner should obtain the bank statement at an address that the accountant doesn't have access to, and should review that statement, if not even reconcile the bank personally. That's how I caught an attorney's controller in finding cash that she had stolen. In a matter of 30 days, her first 30 days, because the attorney didn't check her background, she stole every amount of cash that was ever brought into the firm. Tip number 4, if you have a commercial internet banking access, check it every single day. You only have 48 hours to report fraud as a company with internet banking access. And check with your banker. Certainly your bank may have different time frames, but I learned this one personally when I had fraud committed against my checking account. Tip number 5, the bookkeeper should take a 2-week vacation every year without exception. Reluctance to do so indicates defensiveness and excess control on the bookkeeper's part. And those two are key indicators of fraud. Tip number 6, report the problem. It's like a colonoscopy. It's embarrassing to talk about, but if you don't step up and report the problem, many other people and companies after you are going to be harmed. In the attorney's case, they hadn't done the background check. They were dealing with a twice indicted felon who had committed fraud in at least 2 other companies and been caught. They didn't report the problem. She simply went back to jail because she violated probation. She wasn't supposed to be employed handling cash or doing accounting work again. But as soon as she got out, she committed the fraud again on a 4th company. Tip number 7, scrutinize consultants as closely as you do employees. Check to see that your consulting firm completes background checks on their employees, drug tests, and whether or not they carry performance bonds. Tip number 8, scrutinize financial statements for basic mathematical accuracy. That's just the beginning, but you really should be looking at a regular financial statement. I know a lot of small companies that operate based on what's my cash balance, what do I owe, what are my receivables, and a guess on inventory. In one particular case, an entrepreneur was trying to get his company ready to be sold. He failed the due diligence test simply because his financial statements didn't add correctly. The accountant had whited out the $1, comma in front of $3,000 of inventory on the balance sheet. And because of that, the company value went from several million to zero. Tip number 9, be suspicious. Listen to your gut. The first thought that you get that, hey, maybe something isn't quite right here, you're likely 6 months or a year or two into the problem. Chaos in your entries, an overstressed attitude by the accountant that they can never be bothered with something, even a messy, really messy office. These are good methods to cover up fraud. 2 neurosurgeons that had fraud committed against them were even locked out of their own accounting office in their professional offices. That's a key signal something's wrong. If you're a small business owner and you can't afford the Lexus or 2 horses, your accountant can't. Forensic accountants have told me one of the biggest things that they see is too much opportunity, and it is one of the primary causes of fraud 70% of the time. Good people will be dishonest if they are given the opportunity. Tip number 10, your audit or review is not protection. Your CPA auditors are not trained to look for fraud, and they won't be looking for fraud with a review or an audit or the preparation of a tax return. You usually need a forensic accountant and a highly skilled system analyst deeply familiar with your financial software. These were the 10 tips to prevent fraud in your company. And one of the key things is to contact resources early. I'm not a forensic accountant. I'm not a CPA. I'm a certified management accountant. I am a system analyst deeply familiar with Dynamics GP, and I'd be glad to refer you to certified fraud examiners or CPAs who specialize in fraud examination. Thank you.